January 13th, Johnny Cash walks into America's most notorious prison, carrying nothing but his guitar and a song written by a convicted murderer. What happened next would save his dying career and change music history forever. But first, let me tell you why everyone thought this was the worst idea in country music. By 1967, Johnny Cash was drowning. The Man in Black, once the voice of rebellion, defiance, and redemption, was spiraling out of control. His record sales had flatlined. His marriage was unraveling. And the pills that had kept him performing and touring for years were now threatening to destroy him. Columbia Records, once proud to call him their star, was quietly giving up. The golden boy of country music was fading fast. Then Cash came forward with an idea that sounded insane. He wanted to play and record a live concert inside Folsom Prison, one of California's most notorious penitentiaries. To the record executives, it was career suicide that a concert for hardened criminals? That wasn't a comeback, it was madness. But Johnny Cash saw something no one else did. He saw an audience that understood pain, regret, and the search for redemption in a way the outside world could never comprehend. To them, his songs weren't just entertainment, they were confession. On a cold January morning in 1968, Johnny Cash walked through the iron gates of Folsom Prison. Not as a preacher, not as a superstar, but as one of them. And surrounded by 1,800 inmates, he found what he'd been missing all along: purpose. That day didn't just change his career. It changed American music forever. Folsom wasn't just any prison. It was a fortress of misery. A slab of gray stone and steel rising from the Sacramento Valley, its walls topped with barbed wire and gun towers that watched like silent sentinels. Inside those walls were California's hardest men, some serving life, some awaiting execution, all hardened by decades of crime, violence, and isolation. And that was exactly why Johnny Cash wanted to play there. He didn't want an easy audience, that he wanted truth, raw, unfiltered, and undeniable. He wanted the kind of audience that felt every lyric in their bones, that lived the words he sang. Even California's governor, Ronald Reagan, voiced support for the concert, understanding that it wasn't just another performance, that it was about giving a voice to the forgotten. A reminder that even behind steel and concrete, human dignity could survive. The night before the show, Cash paced his hotel room in Sacramento. A guard from Folsom slipped him a cassette tape, a rough, echoing recording made inside a prison cell. The voice belonged to Glen Sherley, an inmate serving time for armed robbery and murder. Sherley had written a song called Greystone Chapel, a haunting, melancholy ballad about finding even a flicker of faith and hope inside the darkness of prison life. When Cash listened, he froze. It was truth in its purest form. The kind he had been chasing in his own life for years. He stayed up late into the night, learning every chord, memorizing every word, determined to bring that song to life. The next morning, in front of 1,800 hardened men, Johnny Cash stepped to the mic. Between songs, he paused and said, "This next one was written by one of your own, Glen Sherley." Then, the Tennessee Three struck the first chords of Greystone Chapel. At first, there was silence. Then a wave of emotion swept through the crowd. Men who hadn't felt anything in years were wiping their eyes. Some clapped. Others bowed their heads. For a few minutes, Folsom wasn't a prison. It was a church, a sanctuary of sound and shared humanity. When the song ended, the room erupted. Inmates roared, some pounding tables and walls in applause. Even the guards couldn't hide their smiles, and the warden stood frozen in astonishment. Johnny Cash had just turned a forgotten convict into a songwriter heard around the world. Cash pulled strings to get Shirley's song recorded, and even help him gain parole. He gave him a job on his tour, brought him on television, and told the world his story. But freedom proved heavier than prison walls. Outside, Glen struggled with fame, addiction, and the shadows of the life he had left behind. In 1978, unable to outrun his demons any longer, he took his own life. Cash never forgot him. He knew that saving souls wasn't always a neat or happy story. But for one shining moment inside Folsom, Glen Sherley, Inmate number 59795 was more than a number. He was a man whose song reached hearts and souls far beyond those walls, reminding everyone of music's profound power. Among the men in that audience, one pair of eyes watched Johnny Cash with silent awe, a young inmate named Merle Haggard, then serving time at San Quentin for attempted robbery. Seeing Cash perform behind bars changed everything for him. He saw strength, defiance, and dignity in a man who stood where no star dared to stand, in front of the broken, singing about hope. When Haggard got out, he turned his life around and became one of country music's greatest voices, another outlaw poet shaped by the shadow of prison walls. One concert point, two legends, both carrying the same message, redemption. When At Folsom Prison was released later that year, it exploded. The world couldn't get enough of its raw honesty. No polish, no filter, just truth. The record sold over 6 million copies, revived Cash's career, and redefined what country music could be. The man written off as a washed-up addict was now a symbol of compassion, faith, and rebellion rolled into one. But Johnny Cash didn't stop there, that he used his rebirth to fight for the forgotten. He testified before the U.S. Senate in 1972, pleading for prison reform and rehabilitation over punishment. He performed at more than 30 prisons across the country, funded chapels and libraries, and met inmates one by one, reminding them they were still human beings with dignity. That on that cold morning at Folsom, something extraordinary happened. A man on the edge of his own redemption gave hope to those society had left behind. And in return, they reminded him what his music was for. That's the real power of the man in black. Not just the music, but the message. No matter how far you fall, redemption is always possible. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button, because music history is full of moments like this that changed everything. And I've got plenty more to share.